She manipulated me into giving her $250, $0 for what I thought was a new start, only to find out she'd been secretly selling my family's property behind my back. Now she's suing me for half of everything, and I can't believe I ever trusted her. Hello, everyone. Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments section below. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Now, let's begin the video. Using a throwaway for obvious reasons, with certain specifics modified to preserve anonymity. It all started with what I thought was a fresh start. My wife had always been good at convincing me she knew what was best, especially when it came to money. She'd spin these elaborate stories about needing a new beginning, a clean slate, and I, naive as I was, believed her. We'd been married for about 10 years, and honestly, I thought I knew her inside out. But in the end, I was just too trusting, and that trust would be shattered in ways I never saw coming. It was late one evening, about 3 weeks ago, when I started noticing the strange little things. My gut told me something was off. Had always been a little bitchy when she didn't get her way, but lately she'd been downright hostile over small things, like the way I handled money or if I was late coming home from work. She'd throw tantrums, accuse me of hiding something, and I'd brush it off, thinking maybe she was stressed or just being herself. Then I found the receipts. I was going through some old papers in the home office, trying to clear space, when I saw a stack of bank statements I didn't recognize. They were from accounts I didn't remember opening, linked to properties I'd never heard of. When I looked closer, my stomach dropped. There were transactions, large sums of money transferring out, properties being sold without my knowledge, and the most shocking part. His name was all over the paperwork. She'd been secretly selling off our family's land, our childhood home, the property my grandparents left us. I couldn't believe it. I started digging deeper. I pulled up her phone records, her emails, anything I could find. The more I looked, the worse it got. She'd been meeting with real estate agents, lawyers, all behind my back. I found texts where she was negotiating deals, lying about where she was, even claiming she was working late when she was actually meeting with these people. It was like she'd been planning this for months, maybe longer. And the worst part, she manipulated me into giving her over $250, $0, money I thought was for a new business venture, a fresh start for us. Instead, she'd been funneling it into her secret schemes. When I finally confronted her, she had the nerve to deny everything. She looked me dead in the eyes and said I was imagining things, that I was paranoid, that she loved me and would never do anything to hurt me. But I had the evidence. I showed her the bank statements, the property deeds, the texts. She just sneered and told me I was overreacting, that I was jealous and insecure. She called me controlling, said I didn't trust her. That was the moment I realized how deep her lies went. She was a master manipulator, and I was just too blind to see it. The shock hit me hard. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. I kept thinking about all the years we'd spent together, how I'd trusted her with everything. My heart, my money, my family's legacy, and she'd betrayed me in the worst way possible. I was furious, of course, but also incredibly sad. I couldn't believe I was married to someone who'd lie and cheat her way through life, who'd sell off our family's history for her own gain. It felt like my entire world was crumbling around me, and I didn't even know where to start picking up the pieces. But even through all the anger and heartbreak, a part of me knew I had to act. I couldn't let her get away with it. I started planning my next move. I knew she'd try to spin her way out of this, so I had to be smart. I needed proof, legal advice, a plan. I wasn't going to let her walk all over me, not after everything. The betrayal was too deep, and I knew I'd have to fight for what was left of my family's legacy and for my own sanity. This was just the beginning. After I collected the evidence, I didn't waste any time. I knew I had to be careful. Was a master at lying, twisting words, and making herself look innocent. I had seen her do it before. She'd cry, scream, manipulate her way out of trouble, and I wasn't going to let her do that again. So I started logging everything. The bank statements, the texts, the emails, even the times she left the house late at night. I made copies of all the documents I found and stored them securely. I also reached out to a lawyer I knew from work, someone who specialized in property and family law. I wanted to understand what my options were. especially since she was now suing me for half of everything, claiming I was trying to cheat her out of her fair share. The lawyer listened carefully, then told me I had a strong case. She explained that selling of the property was unauthorized and that I was the rightful owner of the land, since it was in my family for generations. But the lawyer also warned me that might have some tricks up her sleeve, like claiming she had a prenup, or that I was somehow involved in the illegal sale of the land. I knew I needed proof that she'd been manipulating me financially, and that meant digging even deeper. I decided I had to catch her in the act. I started secretly monitoring her phone and emails, installing some discreet tracking apps on her devices. I wanted to see if she was meeting anyone, making calls, or exchanging messages that could prove she was cheating on me, physically or emotionally. It was a sick feeling, knowing I was spying on my own wife, but I couldn't trust her anymore. Every time I saw her sneaking around, I felt a mixture of disgust and heartbreak. How did I get here? How did I trust someone who clearly had no loyalty? One night, I followed her when she said she was going out with friends. Instead of going to a bar, she drove to a cheap motel on the outskirts of town. I parked a few blocks away and watched her go inside. I could see her through the window kissing another man, someone I'd never seen before. The way she was all over him, whispering, laughing, touching him, it hit me like a ton of bricks. My wife was cheating on me with some guy she met through her secret real estate deals, probably someone she'd been sleeping with for months. I felt sick, betrayed, and furious all at once. The next day I confronted her. I told her I knew everything, the affair, the property scam, the money she'd taken. She tried to deny it at first, but I had the proof. Her face went pale, then she started crying, claiming I was crazy, that I was paranoid, that she loved me and would never do something so horrible. She called me controlling, accused me of spying on her, and said I was ruining our marriage. But I didn't care anymore. I was done listening to her lies. I told her I wanted a divorce, and that I was going to fight her for every penny, every piece of property she'd secretly sold. The emotional toll was overwhelming. I'd always believed in the vows we took for better or worse, but now I wondered how I missed all the signs. I felt stupid, naive, and deeply hurt. To think I'd trusted her with my life, my family's legacy, and she'd been secretly screwing around and selling our assets behind my back. It was a betrayal I didn't think I'd recover from. Every day since I found out has been anger, sadness, disbelief. I kept asking myself how someone I loved could do this to me, to our family. Now I'm at a crossroads. I have all the evidence I need to fight her in court, but I also know this could destroy what's left of our marriage. Part of me still hopes she'll realize how much damage she's caused and try to make amends, but deep down, I know that's probably a pipe dream. I've learned that trusting blindly is a mistake, especially with someone who's willing to manipulate and cheat their way through life. I'm more cautious now, more guarded, but mostly I'm just exhausted from the emotional chaos. I never thought I'd be in a situation like this, and honestly, I don't know how to move forward. All I know is that I need to protect what's left of my family and myself, even if it means tearing everything apart. After I gathered enough evidence and had a clear picture of what was really up to, I knew I had to get serious about my next steps. I wasn't just dealing with a wife who lied about her fidelity. I was dealing with someone who had systematically stolen from our family, manipulated me into giving her hundreds of thousands, and now was trying to claim half of everything I still had left. It was a nightmare I couldn't wake up from, and I realized I had to play this smart if I wanted any chance of coming out on top. First, I contacted my lawyer again. We set up a plan to get a court order to freeze all her accounts and any assets she might be hiding. This way, she wouldn't be able to move the money or sell off any more property. I also started preparing for a divorce, something I'd avoided for years but now seemed inevitable. I knew would fight tooth and nail, throwing accusations, lies, and maybe even trying to spin the story that I was the bad guy. I had to be ready for her to spin her web of lies, so I kept all the evidence organized, documented every interaction, and made sure I had witnesses if needed. Meanwhile, I started talking to some of her friends, those who might have known about her schemes or her affair. I had to find out if she'd been bragging, or if anyone else knew the full story. To my surprise, I found out she'd been telling her closest friends that I was controlling, abusive, and that I'd cheated on her first. It was classic twisting everything to make herself look innocent. But I also learned that some of her friends suspected she was hiding something, and I was grateful I wasn't the only one who saw her for what she was. One thing I hadn't expected was how much this was affecting me emotionally. I felt betrayed, yes, but also humiliated. I kept replaying all the moments I'd trusted her, all the times I'd believed her lies. How could I have been so blind? I started questioning everything about our marriage. Was I ever really loved? Did she ever love me, or was I just a convenient fool? I felt angry at myself for not seeing the signs sooner, but I also knew I had to focus on the present. I couldn't change the past, but I could fight for what was left and make sure she didn't get away with this. In the meantime, was trying to play the victim. She'd call me, crying, saying I was ruining her life, that I was trying to take everything she's ever worked for, even though I knew she'd already taken so much from me. She accused me of being paranoid, said I was mentally unstable for suspecting her, and even claimed I'd been controlling her. It was classic gaslighting, and I could see right through it. I refused to get dragged into her chaos. Instead, I stayed calm, let her rant, and kept my focus on the legal side of things. The biggest shock came when I found out she'd already been in the process of transferring some of our money offshore, trying to hide it from the court. I wasn't surprised. I knew she'd do anything to protect herself. That's when I decided to hire a private investigator. I needed someone who could track her movements, her financial transactions, and her contacts. I couldn't just rely on her word or my own digging. I needed hard proof, proof that would stand up in court and prevent her from slipping away with everything. The pie came back with some alarming news. Was meeting with a new lawyer, apparently to prepare for a big fight over the assets. She'd also been contacting old friends and acquaintances, trying to gather support or create a narrative that I was the villain. I felt a surge of anger. She was trying to spin the story again, make herself look innocent, and pin everything on me. But I was ready. I had the evidence, the legal backing, and the support I needed to fight her. Some nights, I just sat in silence, thinking about how everything had fallen apart so suddenly. I kept asking myself how I didn't see it coming, how I didn't realize that the woman I loved was capable of this much deception. But I also knew I had to stay strong. I couldn't let her destroy what's left of my life. I needed to be strategic, patient, and prepared for whatever she threw my way. I'd been betrayed in the worst way, but I was determined to get justice, not just for me, but for the legacy of my family. This wasn't over yet, and I was going to make sure she paid for what she'd done. By now, I was fully immersed in the legal battle. Every day felt like walking a tightrope. One wrong move, and might slip away with even more of what was rightfully mine. I had to stay one step ahead. I'd hired a forensic accountant to trace every dollar she transferred offshore or hidden in secret accounts. Turns out, she'd been funneling money into accounts under fake names, trying to dodge the legal notices I'd already filed. It was a game of cat and mouse, and I knew I had to be relentless. I also started preparing emotionally. I couldn't afford to be weak. The betrayal, the lies, the affair, everything was eating away at me. I'd always believed in honesty and loyalty, but now I saw how easily people can lie and manipulate. I was furious at for dragging me into her web of deceit, but I also felt a twinge of sadness. I'd loved her once. I'd trusted her with my life. Now, that trust was shattered, and I wondered if I'd ever be able to trust anyone again. One particularly shocking development came a week ago. I got a tip from the pie that was planning to leave the country with a large sum of money, possibly to start a new life somewhere overseas. She'd been trying to buy tickets, make arrangements with shady contacts. I immediately contacted the authorities and my lawyer. We managed to get a court order blocking her from leaving the country, and I also had the airline confirm she was trying to book a one-way ticket to an island in the Caribbean. That was a wake-up call. I realized she was willing to run, to escape with what she'd stolen. The court hearing about the asset freeze was intense. Showed up, looking furious, claiming she was the victim, and that I was trying to ruin her reputation. She spun her usual lies about how I was controlling, paranoid, and that I'd cheated on her first. Nothing about the fact she'd been secretly selling property and stealing money. Her lawyer argued that she deserved half of everything because I'd supposedly controlled her finances. But I had all the evidence, proof of the secret sales, the offshore accounts, the texts, everything. The judge saw through her lies and granted the asset freeze, which was a huge win for me. Throughout all this, I felt like I was living in a nightmare. I'd wake up every morning with a knot in my stomach, knowing that was still scheming behind my back. The betrayal was deep, and I was starting to question everything about my marriage. Was I just a fool for believing in her? Was I naive to think she'd ever be faithful or honest? The emotional toll was draining. I'd go from feeling rage to profound sadness, often in the same hour. I'd sit alone, staring at the evidence I'd collected, trying to process how someone I loved could do this. Despite all the chaos, I refused to give up. I knew was trying to manipulate the situation, to spin it in her favor, but I had the truth on my side. I started documenting every interaction, every lie she told, every attempt she made to hide or move money. I also reached out to some of her close friends again, trying to gauge her true motives. Many of them had no idea about her schemes, and some were genuinely shocked when I told them the full story. I realized I wasn't alone in this. There were people who saw her for what she was, even if she tried to paint herself as the victim. As I watched her try to lawyer up and prepare for a fight, I couldn't help but feel a mixture of disgust and resolve. She thought she could outsmart me, but I had the law, the evidence, and the truth on my side. I was determined to see this through, to restore what was left of my dignity and to make her pay for the betrayal. I knew this was only the beginning of a long, exhausting battle, but I was ready for it. I had to be. My life, my family's legacy, and my sanity depended on it. In the end, I realized that no matter how much she manipulated or lied, the truth always comes out. And I was finally starting to see that painfully but clearly. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of legal battles, secret meetings, and emotional exhaustion. Ever the manipulator kept trying to spin her narrative. She, call, cry, scream, accuse me of everything from infidelity to mental instability. She'd claim I was trying to ruin her, that I was a controlling monster, and that I was only after her money. But I had enough now. I had the evidence, screenshots of her texts with her lover, bank statements showing the offshore accounts, the property deeds she'd illegally sold behind my back. I refused to let her gaslight me anymore. One day, I received a court summons for a hearing to determine the division of assets, was fighting hard, claiming she deserved half of everything because she'd contributed emotionally and domestically. She even tried to say she was entitled to a share of the property because she'd helped manage the family estate. I couldn't believe her audacity. I showed up with my lawyer, clutching the mountain of evidence I'd collected. We presented everything: the illegal property sales, the offshore transfers, the texts where she admitted to manipulating me into giving her money. The judge listened carefully, and I could see the wheels turning in her mind. It was a long, tense day in court. Sat there, trying to look innocent, but her lies crumbled under the weight of the facts. My lawyer argued that her actions were fraudulent and that she had no legal claim to the properties she'd fraudulently sold. The judge finally ruled that had no right to claim any part of the family assets that she'd unlawfully sold or hidden. She was ordered to pay restitution for the money she'd stolen, and the court froze her remaining assets. That felt like a huge victory, but I knew the fight wasn't over yet. She was still trying to leave the country with a significant amount of money, and I had to stop her. I coordinated with law enforcement and the airlines, and just in time, Sa's attempt to leave was thwarted. She was detained at the airport, trying to board that one-way flight to the Caribbean. Watching her get stopped, I felt a strange mix of anger and relief. It was a small victory, but it meant I was holding her accountable. I knew she'd try again, though. She was desperate, cornered, and willing to do anything to escape justice. In the aftermath, I finally started to breathe easier. I filed for divorce, and the process moved quickly once I had the evidence. False accusations and manipulations couldn't hold up in court. I felt a strange sense of closure, like I was finally taking control of my life again, but the emotional scars remained. I was angry, betrayed, and hurt. I kept asking myself how I'd let someone get so deep into my life, how I'd missed the signs of her deception for so long. Looking back, I realize I learned some harsh lessons. Trust is fragile, and it's easy to be blinded by love or hope. I also learned that some people will manipulate and lie for their own gain, no matter the cost. But I also learned the importance of standing up for myself, of fighting for what's right, even when it seems impossible. This betrayal changed me, but it also made me more cautious, more aware. I don't know what the future holds, but I do know I won't be naive again. I'll never let someone like her manipulate me like that again. And honestly, I hope anyone reading this learns from my mistake: trust but verify. Protect yourself and don't ignore the warning signs, no matter how much you love someone. Because in the end, some betrayals are just too deep to come back from. Looking back now, I realize I went through a hell of a lot more than I ever expected when I married. I thought I was building a life with someone I loved and trusted. Instead, I ended up fighting for my sanity, my family's legacy, and my own sense of justice. The betrayal cut deep. She manipulated me into giving her hundreds of thousands, secretly sold off property I thought was safe, and then had the nerve to accuse me of controlling her, as if she hadn't been controlling everything behind my back. The worst part is how long it took me to see her true face. I kept making excuses, telling myself she was stressed or tired, that maybe I was overreacting. But the truth was right there in front of me all along. She lied, cheated, manipulated, and lied some more. And all I could do was feel the pain of realizing I'd been blind to someone I once loved and trusted with everything. Now I'm finally free from her. The court rulings have confirmed what I always knew deep down: she had no right to what she stole and lied about. I've regained control of my assets, and I've started rebuilding my life. It's not easy. Trusting again, opening up my heart after such a betrayal, is a slow process. But I know I'm stronger for having gone through this. I learned that love isn't enough if it's built on lies. Trust must be earned and maintained, or else it's just a house of cards waiting to fall. One thing I want to say to anyone going through something similar: don't ignore the signs. If your gut is telling you something's wrong, listen. Dig deeper. Protect yourself, especially your financial security. Because betrayal like this doesn't just hurt, it destroys everything you thought was real. But also, don't lose hope. Even after the worst kind of betrayal, you can pick up the pieces and rebuild a better life. It might take time and it might be painful, but you'll come out stronger on the other side. I don't regret standing up for myself, even if it meant a long, exhausting fight. I learned that sometimes you have to be your own hero, especially when the person you trusted the most turns out to be your biggest enemy. I still feel the sting of what happened, but I refuse to let it define me. Instead, I'll use it as a lesson, one that's made me more cautious, more aware, and ultimately more resilient. So, if you're in a situation where you suspect something's wrong, trust your instincts. Gather the evidence, protect what's yours, and never let anyone manipulate or betray you without consequences, because in the end, the truth always comes out, and the ones who lie and cheat will have to face it. And I promise, justice can prevail, even when it feels like everything been lost.